Hello, this is Emma. I'll be reading you Debbie's story today, which is titled My Rich Aunt Left Me Everything, a Big House, and $3 Million. At the will reading, my parents, who had left me 10 years prior, unexpectedly appeared. They said, "We're your guardians," grinning. However, they became pale when my lawyer entered. All right, let's leave. Sitting here at my aunt's house, I'm attempting to make sense of what transpired 2 days ago. I keep wondering about how I got here in the first place, even though the funeral seems like a haze now. I suppose I should begin at the beginning, when everything in my life changed 10 years ago. I'm 18 years old, and my name is Debbie. But when I was 8, I lived with my parents and 2 older brothers in Alabama. My brothers, Jake and Connor, were 14 and 15 back then. Honestly, they were pretty much the center of my parents' universe. Mom and Dad were always driving them to football practice, paying for their equipment, and going to their games. They had this whole routine where everything revolved around the boys. Don't get me wrong, my parents weren't abusive or anything. They fed me, made sure I got to school, and bought me clothes when I needed them. But it was like I was just there, like background noise in their real life. While they were cheering at Jake's games or helping Connor with his college prep stuff, I was usually just sitting in my room, reading or watching TV alone. But I didn't really understand how bad things were until that night when I was 8. I couldn't sleep because it was really hot, so I went downstairs to get some water. That's when I heard Mom and Dad talking in the living room. They were speaking quietly, but I could hear them from the hallway. "We can't keep going like this, Mike," Mom was saying. "The mortgage payments are killing us, and with your job situation getting worse." "I know, Linda, I know." Dad sounded really stressed. 3 kids is just too much right now. We can barely afford Jake and Connor's sports fees, and there's no way we can pay for college for all 3 of them. "We need to do something," Mom said. "We need to figure out a solution." "What are you thinking?" Dad asked. "Well, your sister Margaret has that big house in Arkansas. She's been alone since her divorce, and she always asks about the kids when she calls. Maybe?" I didn't really understand what they were talking about. I mean, I knew we didn't have a lot of money compared to some of my classmates' families, but I didn't know things were that bad. And I had never even met Aunt Margaret. Dad barely talked about her, except to mention she lived far away and worked for some big company. I went back to my room that night and didn't think much more about it. Kids that age don't really process conversations like that properly. I figured they were just worried about bills, like all adults seem to be. About a month later, school ended for summer vacation. I was excited because I thought maybe we'd do something fun as a family. But instead, Mom and Dad told me we were going on a road trip to Arkansas to visit Dad's sister. The drive took forever. Jake and Connor got to stay home because they had summer football camp, which I thought was unfair. But I was also kind of excited to meet this mysterious aunt and see a new place. When we got to Arkansas, I couldn't believe how big Aunt Margaret's house was. It was like something from a movie, with this huge front yard and tall white columns. Aunt Margaret came out to meet us, and she was nothing like I expected. She was taller than Dad, with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore this crisp white blouse and dark pants, like she was going to a business meeting. "So, this is Debbie," she said, looking down at me with these sharp blue eyes. But then she smiled, and her whole face changed. "Hello, sweetheart. I've been looking forward to meeting you for a very long time." She seemed kind of strict and serious, but there was something warm about the way she looked at me, like she was really seeing me, not just glancing over me to get to something more important. Dad and Mom came in with my suitcases, and we sat in this fancy living room while Aunt Margaret served us iced tea. The adults talked about boring stuff while I looked around at all the nice furniture and the paintings on the walls. Everything looked expensive and clean. After about an hour, Dad stood up and said, "Well, we should get going. It's a long drive back." I jumped up too. "Okay, let me get my stuff." But Dad and Mom exchanged this weird look, and Mom said, "Actually, honey, you're going to stay here with Aunt Margaret for a while." "How long?" I asked. "We'll see," Dad said, not really looking at me. "You'll have fun here. Aunt Margaret has cable TV and a big backyard." I started to feel scared. "But when are you coming back?" "Soon," Mom said quickly. "We'll call you." They hugged me goodbye, but it felt rushed and weird. As they walked toward the door, I ran after them. Wait, when exactly are you coming back? What about school in the fall? We'll figure it out, Dad called over his shoulder. Be good for Aunt Margaret. And then they were gone. I stood in the doorway, watching their car drive away, feeling more confused than scared at first. Aunt Margaret put her hand on my shoulder. Come on, dear. Let me show you to your room. The room she gave me was bigger than my room back home, with a canopy bed and its own bathroom. It had huge windows that looked out over the backyard, which had a pool and a garden. Under normal circumstances, I would have been thrilled. This is really nice, I told Aunt Margaret. I'm glad you like it. We'll go shopping tomorrow for anything you need to make it feel more like home. That first week was actually pretty fun. Aunt Margaret took time off work to spend with me. We went shopping, saw a movie, and she taught me how to use her fancy computer. She asked me about school, my friends, and what I like to do. She actually listened to my answers and asked follow-up questions, which was new for me. But as the days went by, I started missing my family. Even though they hadn't paid much attention to me, they were still my parents and brothers. I kept asking Aunt Margaret if Mom and Dad had called. Not yet, sweetheart. I'm sure they will soon. But they didn't call. Not that week or the next week. By the time a month had passed, I was really starting to worry. School was supposed to start soon back in Alabama. Aunt Margaret, I think I need to go home soon. School starts in 2 weeks. She set down her coffee cup and looked at me seriously. Debbie, we need to have a talk. Are Mom and Dad coming to get me soon? I asked, even though I already knew the answer wasn't going to be what I wanted to hear. She took a deep breath. No, sweetheart. They're not coming back. Your parents have decided that they can't take care of you anymore. They've officially given up their parental rights, and I've adopted you. That means I'm your legal guardian now. You're going to live with me permanently. The words didn't make sense at first. I kept waiting for her to say she was joking or that there was some mistake, but she just sat there, looking sad but determined. I started crying then. Not the angry kind of crying, but the deep, hurt kind where you can't catch your breath. Everything I thought I knew about my life was falling apart. Even though my parents had never paid much attention to me, they were still supposed to be my parents. They weren't supposed to just give me away. What about Jake and Connor? Did they give them away too? No, they kept your brothers. That hurt worse than anything. They kept Jake and Connor, but not me. I wasn't worth keeping. I cried for 3 days straight. Aunt Margaret was really patient with me. She brought me food and tissues and just sat with me when I needed someone there. She didn't try to tell me everything would be okay or that my parents had done the right thing. She just let me be sad. On the 4th day, I woke up and realized something. If I was going to live here now, I could either spend the rest of my life waiting for people who didn't want me, or I could try to build something new with the person who did want me. Aunt Margaret, I said that morning at breakfast, I don't want to think about them anymore. If they don't want me, then I don't want them either. And that's how my new life started. Aunt Margaret enrolled me in the local elementary school, and I actually liked it better than my old school. The classes were smaller and the teachers paid more attention to each student. I made friends with a girl named Emma who lived down the street. Aunt Margaret was nothing like my parents. When I came home from school, she wanted to hear about my day. She helped me with my homework and actually explained things when I didn't understand. She came to my school plays and parent-teacher conferences. She bought me books because she noticed I liked reading, not because it was my birthday or Christmas. Her job was really interesting, too. She worked as a financial director for a big company, and sometimes she'd explain what she did. She was really smart about money and taught me how to save my allowance and why it was important to understand how much things cost. The years went by pretty fast. I got good grades, played soccer for a while, and took piano lessons. Aunt Margaret and I developed this routine where we'd cook dinner together and watch old movies on weekends. She'd tell me stories about when Dad was young, though she never talked much about him as an adult. When I turned 14, she asked me something that surprised me. Debbie, would you like to visit your parents and brothers? I could arrange it if you want. I thought about it for maybe 10 seconds. No, they never called or wrote or asked how I was doing. Why would I want to see them now? Sometimes people change and maybe they regret their decision. If they regretted it, they would have tried to contact me by now. It's been 6 years, Aunt Margaret. 6 years and not even a birthday card. She nodded. I think you're right, but I wanted you to know the option was there. That was the last time we talked about them for a long time. Life was good with Aunt Margaret. She was strict about some things, like grades and chores, but she was also fair and actually cared about what I thought and felt. When I turned 16, everything changed again, but this time it was Aunt Margaret who got hurt. She started feeling really tired all the time and losing weight. At first, she thought it was just stress from work, but when she went to the doctor, they found cancer. I remember the day she came home from getting the test results. She sat me down in the same spot where she told me about my parents. I have some bad news, Debbie. I have cancer, and it's pretty serious. I felt like the world was falling apart again. Are you going to die? I don't know yet, but I'm going to fight it as hard as I can. I'm going to quit my job so I can focus on getting better. What about money? What about the house? Don't worry about that. I've saved plenty of money over the years, and I have good insurance. We'll be fine. The next 2 years were the hardest of my life. Aunt Margaret went through chemotherapy and radiation. Sometimes she felt okay, and we could do normal things, but other times she was really sick. I learned how to cook real meals and take care of the house. I drove her to appointments as soon as I got my license. The cancer went away for a while when I was 17, and we both thought maybe we'd beaten it. But then it came back worse than before, right around my 18th birthday. My birthday that year was just me and Aunt Margaret at home. She was too weak to go out anywhere, but she still made me a cake and gave me this beautiful necklace that had belonged to her mother. I'm proud of the woman you've become, Debbie, she told me that day. You're strong and smart and kind, and I know you're going to do great things. 2 months later, I graduated from high school. Aunt Margaret was in the hospital and couldn't come to the ceremony, so Emma's mom filmed the whole thing for her. We set up a video call so Aunt Margaret could watch me walk across the stage. She was crying, but she looked so happy and proud. A month after that, she died. I was with her at the hospital when it happened. She just went to sleep and didn't wake up. She was only 53 years old. After Aunt Margaret died, I felt completely lost. I was 18 and suddenly alone in this big house with no idea what to do next. Luckily, Aunt Margaret's best friend, Carol, helped me with the funeral arrangements. Carol had been Aunt Margaret's friend since college, and she knew how important I was to her. Carol called all of Aunt Margaret's friends and coworkers to let them know about the funeral. Then she said she needed to call my dad since he was Aunt Margaret's only living sibling besides me. Do you want to call him or should I? She asked. You do it, please. I haven't talked to him in 10 years. Carol put the call on speaker so I could hear what he said. The phone rang a few times before Dad picked up. Hello. Hi, this is Carol Collins. I'm calling about your sister Margaret. I'm afraid I have some bad news. She passed away yesterday. There was silence for a moment. Then Dad said, Oh, I see. The funeral is this Saturday at 2 o'clock at St. Mary's Church in Little Rock. I can text you the address. Well, that's unfortunate timing. My son Connor just got promoted at his job, and we're having a big celebration party on Saturday. The whole family's coming, and we've already paid for the catering. I stared at the phone. Carol looked shocked too. I'm sorry. Did you just say you can't attend your sister's funeral because of a party? Look, it's not just a party. This is a big deal for Connor. He's worked really hard for this promotion, and we've been planning this celebration for weeks. Margaret would understand that family comes first. Carol's voice got really cold. Margaret was your family too. Of course she was, but she's gone now and the living have to come first. Besides, Debbie's there to handle things, right? She's an adult now. Carol hung up without saying goodbye. She looked at me with this mixture of anger and pity. Honestly, I wasn't surprised. Disappointed, maybe, but not surprised. It was exactly what I expected from them. The funeral was beautiful. About 50 people came, mostly Aunt Margaret's coworkers and friends from church. Carol gave a lovely speech about what a wonderful woman Aunt Margaret was and how much she loved me. I managed to get through my own speech without breaking down completely. After everyone left, I went back to the house alone. It felt so quiet and empty without Aunt Margaret. I spent the next 2 days just sitting around, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do next. Should I sell the house? Go to college? Get a job? Aunt Margaret and I had talked about college, but not about the practical details. On the third day after the funeral, there was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole and couldn't believe what I saw. It was my parents and both my brothers standing on the front porch like they belonged there. I opened the door slowly. "Hi, Debbie." "Oh, sweetheart." Mom rushed forward and tried to hug me, but I stepped back. "What are you doing here?" Dad pushed past me into the house. "We came to see how you're doing." "Of course. We're so sorry for your loss." Jake and Connor followed him in, looking around the house with these weird expressions, like they were evaluating everything they saw. "Nice place," Connor said, running his hand along the mantelpiece. "Really nice." "We're here to support you," Mom said, settling herself on the couch like she planned to stay. "You shouldn't be alone at a time like this." I stayed standing by the door. "Where were you 3 days ago when I needed support?" "You know, at the actual funeral." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, honey, you know we had Connor's party. It was already planned, and all the relatives were coming. We couldn't cancel something like that. We're here now, and that's what matters. We want to take care of you." I actually laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed since Aunt Margaret died, and it felt bitter. "You want to take care of me? Where have you been for the past 10 years? "That's different," Mom said. "You were living with Margaret, and she was taking good care of you. But now that she's gone, you need your real family." "She was my real family." Jake spoke up for the first time. "Look, we get that you're upset, but you're being dramatic. We're here now because you inherited all this." He gestured around the room. "Mom and Dad are worried about you handling all this responsibility on your own." "What responsibility?" Connor grinned. "Come on, Debbie. This house must be worth what, 800,000? 900,000? Plus whatever money she left you. That's a lot for an 18-year-old to manage." And there it was, the real reason they were here. Dad tried to look serious and concerned. "As Margaret's brother, I'm her rightful heir. I think it's only fair that I inherit at least half of her estate. She left everything to me in her will. It can be contested," Dad said. "Especially when it involves someone so young. You're not equipped to handle this kind of money and property." Mom nodded. "That's why we're here, sweetie. As your parents, we're your legal guardians. That means we can help you manage your inheritance responsibly." They were all looking at me with these fake concerned expressions, but I could see the greed in their eyes. They thought they had me trapped. "Get out," I said quietly. "Right now." "Debbie, don't be ridiculous," Mom said. "We're not leaving. You need us." Jake and Connor exchanged looks and headed toward the stairs. "We'll just pick out some rooms while you guys talk," Jake said. That's when I knew I needed help. I went in my room and found the business card that Aunt Margaret's lawyer had given me at the funeral. She'd told me to call him if I ever needed anything. I definitely needed something now. I dialed his number and he answered on the second ring. "Mr. Patterson, this is Debbie. My parents showed up at the house and they're acting like they own the place. They won't leave." "I'll be right there," he said. "Don't sign anything and don't agree to anything until I get there." 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I ran to answer it before my family could. Mr. Patterson was a tall, serious-looking man in his 50s who had handled all of Aunt Margaret's legal affairs. "Are you all right, Debbie?" "I think so." "They're in the kitchen, eating our food." Mr. Patterson walked into the kitchen with me, and my family looked up from the sandwiches they were making. They had completely made themselves at home, using Aunt Margaret's good plates and everything. "Good afternoon," Mr. Patterson said, setting his briefcase on the counter. "I'm David Patterson, Margaret's attorney. Debbie called me because she's having some issues with uninvited guests." Dad stood up and tried to look important. "I'm Mike Henderson, Margaret's brother. We're not uninvited guests. We're Debbie's parents and legal guardians." "Legal guardians?" Mr. Patterson raised his eyebrows. "What makes you think that?" Mom jumped in. "Debbie is only 18. In Alabama, where we live and where she was born, you don't become a legal adult until you're 19. That means we're still responsible for her and her property." Mr. Patterson actually chuckled. I see the confusion. But Debbie doesn't live in Alabama anymore. She's been a legal resident of Arkansas for 10 years. In Arkansas, the age of majority is 18. Debbie became a legal adult on her birthday 3 months ago. Mr. Patterson opened his briefcase and pulled out some papers. Furthermore, Debbie's legal guardianship was transferred to Margaret 10 years ago when you surrendered your parental rights. Even if Debbie were still a minor, which she's not, you would have no legal authority over her. Jake looked confused. But she's still our sister. Biologically, yes. Legally, no. Margaret adopted Debbie completely. You have no more legal relationship to her than any other stranger on the street. Connor's face was getting red. What about the inheritance? Dad's her brother. He should get something. Mr. Patterson pulled out another document. Margaret's will is very clear and legally binding. She left her entire estate to Debbie. This includes the house, all financial assets, and personal property. The total value is approximately $3 million. You could have heard a pin drop. My parents and brothers just stared at him with their mouths open. Dad's face turned purple. That's not fair. I'm her brother. Family should take care of family. You're absolutely right, I said, speaking up for the first time since Mr. Patterson arrived. Family should take care of family. Where were you when Aunt Margaret was dying of cancer? Where were you when I was taking care of her, driving her to chemotherapy, holding her hand in the hospital? We didn't know she was sick, Mom said weakly. You didn't know because you never called or wrote or cared enough to find out. You had 10 years to be family, and you chose not to be. Mr. Patterson nodded approvingly. Debbie, would you like me to explain to your former family what their legal options are? Please do. You have no legal claim to this property or inheritance whatsoever. Debbie is under no obligation to share anything with you. If you continue to harass her or attempt to pressure her into giving you money, we will pursue legal action for harassment and trespassing. Dad started yelling. This is ridiculous. We're her family. We came here to help her. You came here the day after her funeral, Mr. Patterson said calmly. After refusing to attend that funeral. Your timing speaks for itself. We need that money, Mom was crying now. Our house needs repairs, and the boys want to buy their own places. That's not Debbie's problem, Mr. Patterson replied. Now I'm going to ask you to leave this house immediately. If you don't, I'll call the police. They left, finally. I watched through the window as they got in their car and drove away, probably back to Alabama to figure out their next move. Thank you, I told Mr. Patterson after they were gone. You're welcome, but I'm afraid this might not be the end of it. People get desperate when they think money is involved. He was right. For the next month, they called constantly. The number changed every time, so they must have been using different phones or calling from friends' houses. They left voicemails begging me to forgive them, saying they wanted to be a family again, telling me sob stories about their financial problems. Jake called to say he and his girlfriend wanted to get married but couldn't afford a house. Connor called, saying he needed money for a business investment. Mom called, crying about how guilty she felt and how they'd made a mistake giving me away. I saved every voicemail and text message, just like Mr. Patterson told me to do. After a month of this, Mr. Patterson had enough evidence to send them an official cease and desist letter. He basically told them that if they contacted me again, we'd take them to court and get a permanent restraining order. That finally did it. The calls stopped, and I haven't heard from them since. Now I'm in college, studying to be a financial analyst, just like Aunt Margaret was. I'm living in her house, which feels like my house now. I haven't touched the inheritance money except to pay for college and normal living expenses. Aunt Margaret taught me to be smart with money, and I'm not going to waste what she left me. Sometimes people ask me if I feel bad about not sharing the inheritance with my biological family. No, is the response. 10 years ago, they made the decision that I wasn't worth keeping. When Aunt Margaret took me in, loved me, and gave me a true home, she was making a decision. Aunt Margaret is on my mind every single day. I learned from her that family is more than simply biological ties. It's about the individuals who decide to love you and support you through difficult times. I was hers, and she was my true family. I'm living a fantastic life and doing well in college. In addition to dating David, An engineering student, I formed several close friendships. He believes I made the right decision after I told him the complete story of my family. For me, that's sufficient.